How are you all today? Oh, come on. It's Monday. It's St. Patrick's Day. You just had 2 or 3 parades. Come on, there's got to be a little bit more energy out there than that. Happy Monday. How are you guys all doing today? Good. You. All right. So, as Alison mentioned, the ask for me here today was to talk through a tool and approach that Compass Group has been using. What are we seeing out in the food service industry? How are we seeing energy and climate impacting that, and vice versa? So we're going to go through a couple of different things, but as a little bit of a background to that, some bio for me, or a little bit on my personal background and how I came to this. I've been working in the sustainability area for about 10 years now, specifically with carbon footprint for almost 4 years now. And it was really conceived originally with the idea in mind that at some point our clients are going to be coming to us and looking for solutions that improve their environmental performance in ways that really relate to specifically to climate change. Right? We saw this as something on the horizon that they really wanted to tackle, and we need to be getting ready for that. And as a student of sustainability for that past decade, a lot of issues on the spectrum, I really don't see one that outweighs the issue of climate change. And I say that not necessarily in the context of like, oh hey, it's all doom and gloom, or we just throw in the shoe now, it's all we're all done for. There's a lot that we can do from just setting this up as an awareness perspective of taking the approach of, hey, this is what's going on. Now what can we do about it? Where can we find the opportunities? How can we improve? How can we make a difference? How can we change? So I want to make sure that kind of tenor for the conversation is clear. That I'm not here to deliver the doomsday speech. I'm here to say, all right, hey, from a context of take a look at what's going on and where can we find the opportunities to continually improve and hit those 2015 goals and other goals that UVM might have out there. As a little bit of a framework for the conversation, if anybody else has anything on the agenda burning that they want to chat about, we can feel free to throw that in there. Based on conversation so far with Alex and some of the other organizers, it sounds like we're really looking forward, especially since we don't have as many carryovers from the initial conversation in the series, just to level set and say, okay, well, what's really going on from that 20,000 foot bird's eye view? What's going on in the food supply chain generally? Go down a little bit to say, okay, great, what's the interplay then between climate change, the change of climate change, how is that impacting food service, and vice versa. Go down again to about maybe like a 5,000 foot level and see, keep having to find this microphone spot, figure out what really is Compass Group doing on this initiative, and Chartwell's, what are they doing on this front, and then follow it up specifically with some examples at like the 5 foot level. What are we seeing at campuses? All right, what are some examples, some case studies? Does that sound like a pretty good game plan for your next 30 minutes? Okay, and then obviously Q&A after that, participatory. Still, even after all these years of education and all these years of academia, it's still like, I don't like, you can move up, it's not that hard. I'm not gonna like shame you out the door if you have to get up and leave early for your next class. It's okay, you can move up. With that in mind, wanted to touch on something that we're really seeing from the Compass Group perspective, just when we look across the US nationally, is this concept of the new normal. And as a way to explain that, the consulting firm PricewaterhouseCoopers has recently been talking about the idea that measuring an organization's whole footprint, so beyond just the financial accounting, the whole footprint, shows management the full impact that it's making, as well as that despite these challenges, whatever it might be facing, quantifying the organization's footprint in a common business language has 2 major benefits. First, it helps the management understand the trade-offs between different strategies and make the best decisions for all stakeholders. Then, second, that in turn helps the organization earn more trust for customers and ultimately improve that net income score that even for organizations like institutions of academia is very critical to their lifeblood and being able to deliver continuously on their mission. So that's the message for the Chancellor and the CFO in the room. By the way, is the Chancellor here? No. You can tell them that's their message. For more of our usual prospective clients, the usual more direct managers, the day-to-day, the frontline folks, interacting with your food service colleagues, we're hearing much more frequently that what they want, what's important to them, is more efficient operations, better environmental performance, and great stories that come with that continual improvement. So all of this bundles together say that there really is a new normal in what's important to clients in food service. Now, it's great, Chris. That's all nice pie in the sky. What does that really mean? Like, let's get technical. Dive down a little bit. So go from that 20,000 foot view down to about the 10,000 foot. So, we see this coming from this new normal coming in from a couple of different places in food service. First one is market pressure. So our weather patterns are continually to become more extreme. On that front, what do you all remember about 2012 versus 2013? I know it was like months ago and years ago, but what do you all remember in regards to weather? What was 2012 like? Anything remarkable about 2012?
It was 80 degrees in March.
What's that?
It was 80 degrees in March.
80 degrees in March.
I think it snowed in October.
What's that?
Didn't it snow in October in 2012?
Yeah. So 2012 was actually, honestly, not the hottest days on record in ages. It broke a number of records in regards to just the disproportional highs versus very few lows. There were lots of droughts. You had the vast majority of the country facing a drought-like situation. Now take that and compare it to what was going on in 2013. What was your experience from 2013? That was only a couple months ago. This memory should be a little bit more fresh.
Really wet spring.
Really wet spring, really wet weather, just
Record flooding.
yeah, lots of wet, just really, really wet here. So these types of extremes in the climate patterns that you're seeing, that's part of the dialogue that has shifted over the past couple of years to say like, hey, let's, this is not only saying, all right, hey, maybe climate really is changing, maybe this is really starting to have some impact, but it's also giving us these early indicators of, hey, this could be the new normal. It's not maybe not an outlier anymore. This could be more of what we're going to see going forward. So what does that mean for us in kind of like a day-to-day perspective? For the USDA, we've been looking at seeing food costs increasing by 2 to 5%. We've seen that a variety of our suppliers have said, hey, this weather volatility is going to be one of the biggest, if not the largest, impact factor in our North American agribusiness. Beyond just the impact on our ability to produce things, this type of weather volatility also impacts our infrastructure, right? When the roads wash out, when everything else gets run down, we don't have the ability to deliver all of that type of food that already have produced in the system. So just a lot of that comes down to, at the end of the day, that for the food service operators, we face higher costs from our vendors. And our clients have started noticing that, and they're turning around and saying like, hey, food service operators manage for this. We can't have budgets spiraling out of control due to crazy weather. This is something we need you to own up and manage for. So that's one area where we're seeing increased pressure. Second place that we're seeing this coming from is the market options. So 10 years ago in North Carolina, we were seeing folks fishing shrimp off the coast. I'm trying to use local examples. I know how important local is for Vermont. Today we're seeing them, just because of the changes in their climate and their ecosystems, we're seeing them say like, hey, there's no more shrimp there. Now we have to go farm jellyfish, and actually, everybody in the US, jellyfish? No? Okay. So now, not only are we farming something different here, we have to send it all the way across the world to find a market for it. So we're starting to see a lot of impact locally on what really is available because of these changes in the climate. Now, beyond all of that, there's also, third, market viability. So CDP is predicting also an increase in foodborne illnesses. So given what we said about 2012 and 2013, why is that the case? Why would CDP say that, or sorry, CDC, say that there's going to be an increase in foodborne illnesses?
Increase in what?
Foodborne illnesses. If we're having more extreme hot days, more extreme wet days, why does the CDC think that there could be more foodborne illnesses?
Quality. Quality of food.
Why?
Food quality.
Yes, why?
The food
Oh,
will spoil faster.
Spoiling.
So it's wetter, more runoff from cattle ranches or something.
And you guys are all kind of getting to the point that it becomes then harder to maintain the product, right? It becomes harder to maintain the food if you're thinking about refrigerated areas, storage facilities, transporting any of this stuff. If it's really hot, that's going to tax the system a lot more. If it's really wet, it's going to tax the system a lot more outside of the norms that it was built to maintain, right? So these are all pressures that we as food operators are facing, and that our clients are seeing and turning around and saying, hey, help us manage for this. There's a new normal, help us manage for this. So, climate is impacting us. We're also having a direct impact on the climate. What we know from the UN is that the food industry makes up 33% of all emissions, all greenhouse gas emissions globally, second only after transportation. Department of Energy also flagged food service as the highest energy intensity per square foot. Now, EPA also flagged us as one of the most wasteful as well, single largest component for landfills. So, to say it differently, we're creating a lot of costs for ourselves through all of this. There are a lot of areas within our control, within food service operators' control, where we could be making some type of measurable difference if we know about it, if we have the tools to have that awareness. So we talked about where it's that we have an impact on it. Where do you all think that that's coming from? Where really is our biggest contribution? You think about the whole the life cycle of food. Where's our biggest slice?
Production.
Yeah, I can skip through most of this, and if you guys already know it. So production is really the biggest piece. And there's lots of stories that I can go into that I can say for Q&A. So I'll skip through a lot of those for time, but when you think about let's use beef as one example. By 2050, we're looking at having to need a whole lot more food resources, a whole lot more food, utilizing a whole lot fewer resources, right? So our beef population, we're looking at going from 1.4 billion all the way up to, by 2050, 2.6 billion. In the US, if droughts and everything else are forcing cattle production elsewhere, where is that beef going to be, right? That kind of shrinking livestock population is something that we're seeing migrating over to rainforests or other places, to the extent that you're having a landmass the size of New York City converted to grazing every day. So there's 2 acres just turned from forest into grazing. It's really bad from a greenhouse gas perspective. But above and beyond that, there's also, hey, so not only is there more cattle, now there's less lung capacity for the plant, and by the way, we're replacing it with methane, which is also really bad. So from an emissions perspective, this really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have that, but what does that mean for us as food service operators? Where's the opportunity in there? What can we do around beef if everybody still wants beef? I'm trying to skip some of these so that we can keep interested time here. For transportation, anyone ever heard the song Everything Has a Season? Yeah, yeah. So some people, some of the more younger in the crowd.
Birds, turn.
Yeah, yeah. We have a slightly different song these days. Everything for every season. So if you want cantaloupe year-round, if you want any of these other products, any product year-round, it's not always locally available year-round. Where are you getting it from? How are you flying it in? There's a lot of transportation issues that are a factor in that. Again, the idea for us as food service operators is to think, what can we be doing about that? Where are the opportunities? If there's a demand for it, how can we menu for that in a way that is an understanding of those types of environmental impacts and the business impacts of them? I know you guys asked about equipment, so I will touch on equipment. In terms of energy intensity, we are the number one. Food service as part of the building space is the number one in the built environment. We're up there. Kitchens are really energy intensive, really energy intensive. And what's more, about 80% of that energy is often wasted. So that's a really big thing that if operators have the insight about what's going on, they can tackle something with it and they can do something with it. If they don't, it's really hard to know where the opportunities are. What all this means for us as food service operators is that, yeah, we've been good at managing costs. We've been good at managing labor. We have to become good at managing our equipment, managing our energy, our water, etc., in ways like we've never done before. Skip waste for the time being. If anybody has questions about waste, by all means, let me know. We can circle back to it. I can give you all the whirlwind tour of the globe in 30 minutes or less. So where does that leave us with, what is Compass Group doing? Take it down to the next level. What really is Compass Group bringing to the table on this, if this is what we're seeing? And what we've come up with is Carbon Foodprint as a tool to address what's important to clients. So Carbon Foodprint helps our clients improve their environmental performance in ways that make business sense. It improves the financial aspect of it, while also maintaining, if not improving, the guest experience, right? We do this all in a way to partner with the client to say, all right, hey, what are your stories? What are you trying to achieve? You want to hit carbon neutral by 2015? Great, how can we do that? How can we help you? Now, to make sure this kind of message is crystal clear about what kind of stories we're able to do, what type of stories we're able to tell. Here's one classic example that I've used at a couple of different clients recently. I've been on the road helping Compass out. To get these results, whatever results we just presented, to get these results, you can do it either by having your food service operators go out and plant Central Park twice in 1 year. Or you could have, over that same period of time, your food service operators do these little marginal things that make a really big difference. And by the way, you still get all of your food service delivered and operated, all in ways that make business sense and maintain or improve the guest experience. Which would you rather have your food service operators doing? So those are the type of stories that we're able to tell with our clients based on just having better insights into what we're doing together. Now, while this is a proprietary Compass service, we did develop it in partnership with the best of the best. We looked for industry-leading good case practices, looked for best-in-class methodologies on metrics, and we bundled them together in ways that made sense for our operators. Now, what is our approach? I know there's that question that's been out there. How do we do this? Chris, this sounds magical. Get real, get tactical about this. What does this thing even look like? The approach that we take, like with any other performance improvement initiative, that the methodology is really the same with Carbon Foodprint. First, like with, you all go on road trips here, except for very similar there. Figure out where you're starting from. Create and implement a living plan for continual improvement. And then track that performance and repeat, right? So, how do we do all of that? Not easy to say, but carbon footprint helps establish the benchmark metrics at the unit level and the enterprise level with actionable monthly insights and tailored best practices to that unit. We also provide clients with verifiable, science-based performance metrics for monthly, quarterly, yearly public reporting, whether that's to Asian Stars, Carbon Disclosure Project, GRI, ISO, ACU, President's Climate Commitment, lots of different reporting options. Finally, for the students in the room, or other just guests of your food service operation, we also do this in a way that engages guests through collateral. If you're an app-friendly crowd, we have an app for that as well. And also integrating menu campaigns and a variety of other approaches. So, again, high level, yourself let's make some sense of this. So to take it from about the 5,000 foot level down to the 5 foot level and go through some case studies, some examples. Missouri State University, great example. Just caught up with their team today, and it's continued to spiral on since I last checked in on it, so I'm excited about them. Just as a highlight, again, can get more into it if these are of interest, but they were able to partner with their client and reduce the running time on some of their equipment in ways that save them a heck of a lot of water and save them on the financial side as well. So again, doing stuff that improves the environmental performance and makes business sense, right? Improves financial performance as well. And I haven't seen guest experience go down in any way. Now, Vermont College, local Vermont example for you all. Something good to close out the presentation portion with. So here at Green Mountain, the students, the faculty partnered with our food service operators to say, hey, you have this data set, you're tracking all of this information. Give us, our students, some access to this so we can work with it and figure out and map out some additional things that maybe you haven't done the life cycle analysis on. And now that our students have real life access to real actual data, they can create some real collateral, some real, not just shelfware projects, but projects that actually make a meaningful difference. Collateral that they can actually put into their cafes and use and communicate what they found with the rest of their students, the rest of the faculty. So hey, take mushrooms for example. What's the footprint of a mushroom? How does this dish, what's the footprint of this dish? And if you're picking that dish versus this dish, what does that mean for you? What kind of choices are you making? Or what implications does it have based on your personal dining habits? And by the way, again, for the students in the room, they got credit for doing this. So they got to have hands-on experience and get their degree completed at the same time. So they loved it. The faculty member loved it. Our guy on the ground, David, he loved doing it. Exciting. And it all helped tell the Green Mountain College story. So I know I covered a lot of ground in a really short amount of time. But it sounded like there might be some questions. And also I realized it's Monday on St. Patrick's Day, so I wanted to be mindful of everybody's energy in the room and try and avoid the afternoon food coma. So with that, I'll turn it over to questions if there are any.
Great, thanks so much, Chris. So yeah, we just want to hand around the mic so that we can capture the questions for the recording that's going on today. So let's just dive right in. This is meant to be a real, participatory discussion forum. So questions for our speaker, respond to other questions that you've heard come up. Who wants to start it off?
So Chris, you used the phrase positive stories a lot during the talk, but I was a little bit unclear on what exactly you mean by that. Could you elaborate?
Sure. So, for example, we've got a couple of units that we're able to say, hey, so by the way, we improved our environmental performance and we grew business at the same time. That's a very positive story. So usually you have this kind of negative relationship where, oh hey, we improved our environmental performance, but that's because we did less business, right? It's because we did less stuff, we had less environmental bad stuff happening. In these couple of units we said, hey, we had more guests coming through the doors, we had more students, more faculty, more whomever coming through the door, and oh by the way, we were able to half our environmental impact, right? So that's a really compelling positive story of you're able to decouple those relationships and do something that maybe makes business sense and is really great for the environment and for the planet, right? The story about Green Mountain where you have students who are applying what they've learned, like some faculty member taught them about some stuff, great, the ideas are nice, but now I can actually really apply it, right? So if I'm a learner where I need to get hands-on, I need to get a little bit tactile with it, this food service provider just gave me an opportunity to actually really learn what it is that I want to learn and get credit for doing it, right? So it's those types of positive stories where you can really make some type of tangible difference and do it in a way that really supports what the institution is all about, what's really kind of their mission, right? Does that help answer the question?
Hi, so I was wondering, you mentioned that your online services provides metrics for evaluating their performance across all those different metrics. And I was wondering if you're also using business information, like in terms of, you mentioned that they're practicable on a business level and that they're actually improving their business. So I was wondering if you're using metrics for that as well, or if you're simply measuring environmentally.
Yes. This is a short answer. So the version 1.0, the tool itself, version 1.0, the tool itself is measuring, all right, what's our carbon, water, waste impact. We've lined it up in such a way that we can take that data and pair it up with the rest of the business metrics to say, okay, well, what was your spend, right? What was your guest participation, right? What were all these other different relevant KPIs or key performance indicators, so that the tool gives you additional new insights. You don't need to duplicate systems that already exist, that we already have insights for. Pulling those together in some way that is new, that says, again, putting things into context, hey, so your environmental performance improved, what happened with the rest of the business? How did that change, right? So you can get those types of insights that have a lot more context built into them and have a lot more managerial actionability around them. Does that answer the question for you?
Yeah, thank you.
I got a question. Sorry, I'll go next.
Hi. So you said at Green Mountain College, the students were able to access the data. What exactly did they do with that data? What projects were implemented?
Sure. So they've already had. Most concise way to tell the story. So Compass has already done a variety of life cycle analyses on different product items, right? So different line items within stuff that we bring in the back door. We've already mapped out a lot of the environmental impact for the biggest items, right? The ones that we see come in most frequently. There's still a lot of other items out there. And so we said, all right, hey, well, we have this inventory of everything that Green Mountain College is buying, right? All of that whole inventory, here's the portion that we have LCA data on. So students, take a look at some of these items, right? Here's some maybe of the next low-hanging fruit that are very specific to Green Mountain College and to your locality, and use those life cycle analysis frameworks, approaches, methodologies that your faculty member taught you about, apply that to this data set, and figure out what the farm to plate footprint is so that it lines up with the rest of the data, with the rest of the footprinting data. Is that?
Then once the data's there, like, what's the next step? Sort of changing their buying habits?
Yeah, so once they came up with the insights, then they said, okay, great. Now we know this is the footprint of this mushroom dish or that dish or whatever. Now how do we impact behavior, right? Because at the end of the day, it's all based on the chefs are menuing for what the demographic is demanding, right? So now that you know that about this mushroom dish, communicate it in a way that is effectively engaging those students or that demographic to share that information out and say, hey, by the way, did you know that this dish is really flavorful, really tasty, really whatever is going to make the connection, and has X fraction of the environmental footprint of this dish, right? And helping shift behaviors that way through information, through engaging types of guest collateral and guest campaigns. So they took, step one was, hey, let's use the data, apply the frameworks to it that we have from our faculty. Now that we have those insights, come up with those engaging guest campaigns. And then on the back end, our guy on the ground, David, the food service operator there, was able to say, okay, great, we saw these. Now let's start doing some analysis on, we had this campaign, how did that change menuing, right? How did that change buying behavior? Did it? Did it not? Right? Those are the types of conversations that we're able to follow up and have with those stakeholders.
So it's going more from the demand side of the supply side of change?
I heard your question, I'm not necessarily sure I understood what you meant.
So, because they're marketing the demand, they're marketing toward the consumers, they're not seeing the data and then changing what's supplied to.
You want me to address that?
Yeah, go for it. I'm still not understanding the question, so.
Hi, I'm Kevin Blaney, and I'm the corporate chef for Charles here in New England. And David and Cindy, and a number of our campuses, to your point, it's about driving menu fatigue, menu variety. To Chris's data, we recognize that beef and or cheese are the two major contributors to carbon emissions or carbon footprint. So we know we will never get rid of beef on a menu. We know we will never get rid of cheese on a menu, but we can apply menu engineering to, if I have to have a hamburger on the grill station every day, my idea would be to menu something next to that hamburger that has a high satisfaction component to it. Maybe it's a Vietnamese banh mi sandwich using pork. The hamburger stays on the menu, but I serve 40% less hamburgers that day. So what I've done is reduce my beef consumption for the day and increase satisfaction through menu engineering. So the students kind of help us drive the menu, and we help promote variety. And variety on any college campus, you're going to hit a wall, and it's called menu fatigue. No matter where, you all experience it. You just get tired of going to the same places, eating the same cycle of items. But with the students' help, we can identify menu items that don't have as much cheese in it, not without cheese, less cheese. But we're not advocating that you'll never get cheese or you'll never get beef again. What we need to do as professionals is create a menu that has high satisfaction and then kind of a stealth approach to carbon reduction. Everybody wins. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So you skipped over the landfill component at the end. I'm just wondering to what extent.
Sorry, this has kind of been on and off all day. To what extent the tool incorporates the waste component, how it's managed at the end of life? Does it account for composting? Does it account for food donation? Just wondering to what extent it captures that in terms of the carbon impact as well as methane.
Sure. So, it does capture a variety of the items that you just mentioned, right? So when you're looking at it from a waste perspective, right? What's my waste footprint? Looking at saying, all right, hey, if this is all the stuff that I'm bringing in the door, where does it go? How much of it goes to recycling? How much of it goes to composting? How much of it goes to food donations? How much of it goes to whatever other type of repurposing? And then at the end of the day, how much left is being landfilled, right? So we are tracking that aspect of it to see, to help a lot of units who don't have those types of metrics on hand from their colleagues in their waste haulers or whatnot who will get those types of analytics or insights to help put that together in a way that they can communicate that really clearly and easily to their client, to the university in this case, right? To your point about, okay, so what about the methane, right? And what about all the rest of that stuff? And we talked about, you know, how much of a big portion of greenhouse gas emissions methane is. When when we looked at the life cycle analyses pieces, the largest demand was for farm to table. And so that's where we started with the life cycle analysis piece. When we are looking farm
What
to
do you
table.
mean for largest demand?
When clients are looking, say, for like for a carbon disclosure project or anything else like that, say like, okay, hey, where we need data on the stuff that you're providing, they were looking for cradle to gate. So in the university context, farm to table. That said, we are still seeing increasing demand for, okay, well, what happens from table to cradle, right? So that other piece about where does it go after that? And we are already starting to build that into the next iteration of the system. So it was higher hanging smaller fruit than a lot of the other pieces. And even still, if we incorporated that, all of our signs and all of our indicators are saying your targets wouldn't shift that much. You'd still be focusing on beef, you'd still be focusing on cheese, you'd still be focusing on site equipment. You'd have a little bit more rich data to talk to, but it wasn't as big of a win immediately. Does that answer the question for you?
Yep, thank you.
Chris, I have a question related to how the information gets entered into the tool. Here at UVM, we use the Real Food Calculator to track 4 metrics about sustainability and ethics in the food system. And what that entails is having some students manually enter invoice data in order to capture that. And it's very time intensive, and we've been able to reduce the amount of work a bit, but I'm just wondering, how does the data get into your system? Who's doing that work? What type of like time commitment does that make? And how are you seeing that work over time?
Sure. Happy to talk on that piece. First, are in the audience today, are any of the students the ones who have been doing the manual labor to do that kind of coding? My apologies. Ouch. Harsh job to have. So yes, and that was one of the pieces that we designed for initially when we thought about, all right, hey, at the end of the day, this is ultimately something that has to drive and deliver value to our clients, right? It has to be something that for the universities, it demonstrates that we're living up to our commitment on the president's climate commitment and any of these other things with ASHE. It also had to be something that our operators could implement. It had to be something that was operationally feasible. And at the end of the day, our operators are food service professionals. They're out there getting the food out into everybody's hot little hands. So we wanted to do things that would be as light to non-existent touch as possible. So when you look at the ways that we're collecting data, the vast majority of the time we're just mapping existing data that we're already sitting on and mapping that over to the algorithms and to the lifecycle analyses that we were able to put together from our suppliers and say, all right, based on these invoices, here's that portion of the footprint, right? So A, that avoids all the manual labor and time and effort around that, and B, it avoids all of the human error that might come with that, right? So it just maps it easy, it's not even click of the button, it's just back in the system to system. So on the food supply chain piece, does that answer the question for you? Yeah.
So I do a fair amount of life cycle analysis also, mostly energy, but a little bit of carbon accounting. And when I saw you talk about the where the biggest energy demand was and say that it was production, I was a little bit surprised because a lot of the data that I've seen shows the agricultural level being not a tiny part, but a minority of part, with the processing and packaging being bigger, and then the distribution and food service chunk being much bigger still. So I'm curious if you could explain that. You know, how do you figure that the production side is the biggest?
Sure. Also, Eric, right?
Yes.
Okay. Also, happy to follow up in addition to this, because I'm sure that there's loads of levels of detail that we can get into in the question. I saw your presentation from the last seminar. Alex was able to share that with me, so wanted to, while I was on campus, just compare notes with you. I'm sure that we can have more in-depth conversations and compare notes on that, but not to bore everybody else. To the brief point on that one, a lot of it comes from, when we talk about production, it's how is the thing made, and what is it that we're talking about being made, right? So the aspects around beef, for example, right? So we know that, hey, just from ruminants, from methane, from everything else like that, like cattle, beef, it's a really big portion of where emissions come from. And so for us in our bucketing of things, we bucket that as part of production, right? And so that's where a lot of that big hanging 80+% of the footprint comes from. Is just like, oh, hey, so a lot of it's coming from decisions around using beef or cheese or whatnot. The secondary add-on to that is, okay, well then you have to move the products. Whatever the products were, you have to move them, and then you have to process them, and you, et cetera, et cetera. But it's which products are you talking about in the first place? That was where we were seeing the biggest impact coming from. Does that answer the question for you? Again, at like the 30,000 foot level before we exchange data sets and start chatting in more depth?
Yeah. I have another question too, if I can, real quick.
Do you want to hold it? Sure.
I guess this is building a little on what Allison was saying earlier. We've been using the real food calculator here, which is really based on like food procurement and targeting changes in that realm. So I think one of the really interesting things of what you've presented with your tool is the ability to look at water and carbon and these other things that we don't touch on at all. So I didn't know if you could expand a little on what type of metrics you do look at to measure and make changes in those areas, you know, beyond like a food procurement. Are you looking at machinery? Are you looking at, you know, electricity usage? How are you measuring and making changes in those areas?
So if I heard the question correctly, it's what are we measuring? And what are we measuring in a way that will ultimately make a difference, or that drives change? Did I get that? Okay. Short version, it depends. What's important to you, right? And so for some campuses, they're really focused on, hey, so tell me the BTU per guest, right? Others are, hey, so tell me the gallons per guest. Others are, I really want to know the pounds of CO2e per guest, right? Or I want to know the absolute footprint, I need to know that that's going down. Whatever those metrics are, having those conversations with the clients, with the campuses to say what's important to you, and really looking at, again, for example, with the President's climate commitment, right? So we want to get to 0, right? So that's an absolute target. We can be super efficient, but if our footprint went up on the absolute side, that's not as helpful. So being able to report in an absolute metric, right? Kind of going around in a circle, but I don't know if I'm actually addressing.
So it sounds like you tailor what you target in your metrics depending on what they're most focused on reducing. But
rather than throwing like,
shapes.
yeah, rather than throwing like 30,000 different metrics at somebody, say like, all right, hey, you said these 2 things are the most important. Great. In the quarterly review, in the monthly review, in the semi-annual, the annual, whenever, these are the metrics that we'll have a conversation with you about, right? These are the ones that we're going to follow up on, rather than these miscellaneous, erroneous ones.
So I guess my other question, you brought up the beef and the cheese, and the enteric fermentation and the methane emissions. I wonder, and maybe this is a question that we'll talk about some other time, but I wonder if your tool has a way of differentiating, different ways of producing beef. Like you have your conventional feedlot, largely grain-fed beef that's all fatty and marbled and is just an environmental disaster, versus a really well-run grazing operation which can actually build soil very fast and maybe sequester more carbon over the course of the year than you release as methane. Can you differentiate in your tool between different ways of producing the same, not really the same end product, but on paper it might look like the same end product?
Short version, yes. So based on, for example, folks down at Green Mountain or the folks over at Missouri State, okay, hey, this was what we ordered, right? This was our inventory, this was our spend for the month, right? And we already mapped out with, again, the bulk of our vendors, our suppliers, using that 80-20 rule, say, all right, these are the ones that we already have mapping for, and most of the beef got covered in that, so that particular shipment of beef came from this vendor for this geography, for this zip code. They actually source that from this farm, which has these practices, which et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very much about the actual footprint of that SKU, that product line going to that unit versus just some aggregated kind of national mush of data. So it is very, very tailored to say, hey, ordering this one versus this one would make a difference.
More questions?
What do you do every day?
Great.
Happy to answer that. Can you unpack it a little bit and give me a little bit more context? Is it just like the overbubbling exuberance? You wonder how I find the energy? Are you looking like career path question? Help me understand the question behind the question.
A little bit more of a career path question. I make a point to ask this whenever I go to any kind of seminar on campus. I just want to know, you get to work in the morning, or maybe you don't go into an office. Maybe you do everything from home. What does your day at work look like?
Sure. So, in the role that I have with Compass Group, for me, I'm on retainer. I'm a consultant that is helping and advising and engaging with Compass Group on this program. And I office in the U.S., right? So I can be wherever. There happen to be a whole lot of business in the Northeast where they said, hey, there's a lot of accounts out here. It would be great if you could be located there just so that you're local, it's easy. We don't have to fly you across the country. I have a lot of family out here. I get to experience things like Katrina, or Sandy, firsthand. So lots of reasons why the East Coast were interesting for me, but I could be located anywhere. Because a lot of what I do on a daily basis or a weekly basis is a lot of phone calls or a lot of webinars with folks coast to coast, right? So whether that's folks up in Maine or in New Jersey or over in California, talking about what's going on with your campus. How, even though we've dialed it down and it made it as light touch, zero touch as possible for operators, how do we help you get going on it, right? And once you have your data, how do you find your managerial insights? How do you build up that muscle to make sense of this and get going on it? Then once you have that, how do you tell your stories? How can I help you on that part? So it really depends on what the project is at that time, right? So what the demands, what the requests are. But it leaves a lot of flexibility for you to structure your day. And it's very rewarding in that regard to say, like, all right, hey, I know I need to get this stuff done, and sometimes that can lead to long hours, but at the end of the day, you know that it's actually going to stuff that is really getting used. It's not shelter. So that is incredibly rewarding. That help address the career question for you? Okay.
This could be a question for either of you. Just going back to the menu idea, when we think about procurement and shifting procurement on the campus as a way to kind of get at the environmental impact of food, we run into the whole, like, do we actually need burgers every day, all day question? And I'm curious if Compass has done any, or Chartwell's more specifically, has done any research on whether having beef on the menu at all times or cheese, whether that's like data driven or if it's just the response and the purchasing patterns that drives that.
Okay, there's a couple of ways to answer it because you can look at it the opposite way. If I serve steak and lobster every day, every meal, by day 7, you'd have pitchforks and torches outside of my office. So menu fatigue goes both ways. It could be, I'm sick of eating all of this prime rib or beef. We looked at opportunities to menu distinctively to each campus based on demographics, athletics, male-female ratios, international students. There's a lot that goes into the design and development of any menu. So we have many places where we don't serve burgers every day at the grill. We have a grill, and if somebody absolutely wants a burger and they're willing to wait, we'll go back and get one and make it. But today on the grill, we're not doing that. We're doing quesadillas. Oh, bad example because that has cheese in it. But we would not menu that because that only contributes to menu fatigue. Students have a habit of walking into the same dining hall. They know what's already on that station because they saw it yesterday and the day before, so they keep walking. They know what's on that station because it's the same every day, whether it's pizza or pasta. So the idea in our strategies is that might have a grill on that station, but it's not called the grill. We might have something totally different over there. And it might be only 1 or 2 features, rather than having 7 or 8 features every day. So the boredom of menuing is a fact of life on a college and university. So we don't commit to serving a burger every day, or cheese pizzas every day, or we don't put cheese on every sandwich that we make automatically. If you ask for it, I'd be happy to get it for you. So that's the stealth part of the menu engineering, that you don't miss the cheese today because you know it's going to be there tomorrow. You don't miss the burger because you know it's going to be there tomorrow or the next day or even tonight. But the idea of menuing, you know, lunch and dinner Monday through Friday, and then dinner Saturday and Sunday, to have the same burger, chicken, grilled cheese sandwich, veggie burger, gets old. So, you know, we try to mix it up. And we do it knowing the data, knowing what impacts this. So the chefs and the operators really take a lot of things into, when they sit down to write a menu, it's not just, do I have to write a menu that has fiscal responsibility to the contract? I have a budget. Is it written to the demographics of the campus? Does it have enough foods for a 60-40 female-male ratio? Is it a high athletic, you know, do I have enough calories on the menu? Because there's a lot of sports teams on campus. There's a lot of psychology that goes into writing menus. When you add this factor into it, this may not be important to the student, but if it's important to the client and the campus, I interject those type of strategies without you guys even knowing it, without you even missing it. And then if it becomes important at the student level, then I kind of pull the doors open, the curtains open, and say, this is why I'm doing this, and this is what the impact is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I am curious why stealth is an important part of menuing.
Well, I heard the question. It's not stealth in purposely. It's Take a look at this room. There's 10,000 undergrads on this campus. So reducing carbon footprint is important to everyone here, and a lot of people that aren't here, but in fact, the majority of students on any campus, no matter how green they say they are, just want to get something to eat before their next class. So I don't want to bury them with information that I'm interested in hearing. We work with sustainability groups on campuses, Real Food Challenge groups, we work with them as well. We make everything clear and transparent, but I don't need to have the flat screens blaring at people who really just want to get to class about what I did to reduce the carbon footprint today. It's important, but it's certainly not a priority to the majority of people on campus. That's a fact.
Any more questions?
I'm just going to go back on the waste tangent aspect for a bit. So I actually work with the Agency of Natural Resources in the solid waste program. And in 2013, we did a statewide waste composition study. And there is over 60,000 tons of food waste that's being landfilled in the state of Vermont this year. I should say in 2013, but estimated on an annual basis. Nationally, US EPA estimates that over 32 million tons are wasted daily. And if you break that down to the average weight of a person, that's 1.5 times the population of the US. So I definitely want to make sure that the waste aspect stays part of the conversation, and that when it goes into the landfill, that is one of the highest anthropogenic sources of methane production. So that's why I brought it up in my previous comment. And that taking it out and managing it through composting or anaerobic digestion definitely plays a factor into the greenhouse gas reduction. So while it may not affect the production side of it and the distribution, packaging side of it, the footprint still plays a big role. So also to draw your attention, if you're interested in the subject of how these food wastes can be managed more mindfully, there is a Vermont Organics Recycling Summit on April 3rd at Vermont Technical College. I encourage you to look into it and see if you can attend.
So I didn't necessarily hear a question in that
Yeah,
one.
was there a really?
Yeah, so to build on that points, and my apologies if early exchanges, if it came across that the waste portion of it, the plate to cradle, was unimportant. Not the case. Exactly because of just that sheer volume that we're talking about of food waste. And there's also food loss, but that's a whole other topic. That's in and of itself a very huge problem that the food service industry is definitely tackling. From the greenhouse gas, the climate impact perspective, again, what clients were initially asking for just to get something to market. So like, hey, here's something that we can start talking about to get folks around the table. It didn't make version 1.0. It's still very much something that are like, all right, this needs to be factored in. We need to be building this in here. So it was just a feature sequencing and software project management portion. As far as what can we be doing about that? Right? What are some of those trade-offs? What are some of the things that operators think about? Curious, folks in the audience, how many people like coffee? Okay, cool. How many of you yourself or know a friend who really likes those like double XL large, like here's my coffee for the day, right? You've seen the people who go around like they have the really large, like Dunkin' Donuts style or 7-Eleven style types of coffee mugs, right? Thinking about also how many people, if you buy hot coffee, how many of you like your coffee once it's gone cold? And how many times do you see somebody just kind of pour it out and go in and grab their next thing of coffee? For context on that, thinking about the production, the transportation, and everything else that goes into that, you've got coffee that was produced, grown on one continent, shipped to another continent to be processed and made into coffee, and then shipped then to a third continent to be consumed. And if we're throwing out so much of it every single time we just get one, there's a lot to that waste portion, right? Some of the examples that we looked at was that, if there's about 40% of our food goes just wasted, that's basically for every plate that you get, we're actually taking another full plate and just kind of throwing it out, right? For one way or another. So there's a lot of menuing decisions that go into that. How can you lessen the amount that's getting thrown out? How do you engage suppliers to do that? And so that's very much a part of the conversation. It's usually more from, hey, this waste is a measure of inefficiency, right? And so it's usually tackled more from that waste perspective like we were talking about, how much is being wasted and sent to landfill, versus I care about the climate impact of waste. It's kind of a priority that we had to focus on. So don't walk away thinking that waste is not important.
Any other questions?
I guess I'm curious for the various categories of things that you track with the Foodprint tool, like which ones are most salient for food service operators, or which ones really stand out as like having potential for like reaping carbon benefits?
So,
or easy for them to implement, or something
like what's the low-hanging fruit?
What are you finding that the low-hanging fruit is?
And this is something that's generally fairly common knowledge across the industry for food service. That just a lot of it is really around beef, it's around cheese, it's around equipment, right? So those generally you're not going to find too many folks in food service and the food service industry who are talking about other really low-hanging fruit, how they're approaching it, how they're tackling it, how they're tracking it. You'll start seeing differences there, but pretty much most folks that I've seen and most studies that I've seen are consistently pointing to the really easy stuff is what are we doing in the way that we menu beef, what are we doing in the way that we menu cheese. Kevin gave great examples of those. And then additional above and beyond that, what are we doing with our equipment, right? How are we using that in a way that's efficient, that isn't wasteful? Did that answer the question for you? All right.
So I have a question, which relates to, it sounds like this tool is tracking pretty comprehensively. You mentioned the infrastructure, the equipment, the products themselves, what it has the ability to incorporate the waste pieces, and that you can tailor it to meet the needs of whichever campus you're working with. You also alluded to the fact that you haven't been able to do life cycle analyses for all the products yet, and so I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit about what percentage, how you prioritize which products to track first and to measure up first, and also what you see as sort of like the next steps, like what's the cutting edge for where you see this tool or your next project going to take it beyond what it's able to do right now.
Sure. Some of those are surprises, so I can't really, it's like, hey, here's your Christmas present a little bit early, so I can't take the packaging off that too much. But I'll see what I can share on that front. As far as the why, the rationale between the 80-20 rule, right? Just general good case practice in, we don't want to boil the ocean, right? We just need something that's gets us good managerial insights that are actionable, that help us say, okay, what are we looking at? And really, what does that mean for the vast majority of it, right? We don't need all the crazy outliers, but we need the big bulk. We need to understand where is that bell curve, right? And so when we're looking at what we spend on a monthly basis, what were the main items that just kept coming up consistently again and again and again, and focusing on those main key hitters, and started there. And incrementally going forward, we're going to keep adding additional SKU items, additional product line items to that. Say, all right, this is what we started with, and let's keep making it more relevant to more cafes. We started with what is the most relevant to most cafes, and then adding in additional stuff above and beyond that. Some additional pieces in there that it's really hard to talk about software releases that haven't been fully released yet. That's a big surprise, right? You don't want to let that cat out of the bag too quick. So things that we are looking at for next iterations are just kind of continually down that line to say, okay, well, what consistently is most important to our clients? Take universities, for example, what's most important to the university clients? What are they consistently asking for, and what can we deliver in that regard that is something that we can do nationally while also making sure that it is locally tailored.
Great, thanks. So I think we might have time for one more question. Does anyone have any remaining burning questions for our speaker? All right, well, thank you again, Chris. Were there any final thoughts you'd like to share before we?
One, just excited to see this many people in the room. This is definitely a topic that has been growing over the years, so I'm very excited that University of Vermont is tackling this issue in the way that you have with the Clean Energy Fund and now the speaker series. So I'd encourage you all to keep coming at it, to keep asking the tough questions. This is definitely a fantastic approach, so kudos, thumbs up, high fives.